Hello, my name is Zahar Karetsky. I'm a transitions scholar and postdoc at Eindhoven University of Technology, and this is the Transitions Visions podcast, a podcast series about and for the sustainability transitions community. In this month's episode, I'm still in the on-the-road format. I'm meeting with my guests outside in parks, which adds a bit of variety and is less sterile than the usual episodes. This time I talked with Hiske Arts from Fossiel Netherlands. Fossiel is an activist NGO advocating against oil, gas and coal industries in the Netherlands and Europe, and is part of a larger movement against the continued use of fossil fuels. In August 2024, so this month, they launched a lawsuit against the European Commission in the way it implemented its green taxonomy. You will hear more about it in this episode, but also about the larger mission of Fossiel Netherlands, its strategies and its position on system change, building coalitions and just transitions, which are all important topics in sustainability transitions. So please enjoy, and I invite you to continue sending me your comments, questions and topics for future episodes. And you can reach me on Twitter, LinkedIn and Blue Sky. Thank you very much, Hiske, for joining me here. We're now in beautiful Utrecht, in the sunny Utrecht.
Yes, finally.
What is Fossiel fighting for?
Yeah, we are fighting to break the power of the fossil fuel industry. So it's a very big goal. So we are a people-powered movement, and we try to kick away the pillars of support for the fossil fuel industry. So there is more room for like a transition to a just society. Our focus is on the Netherlands, but at the same time we are very well connected to other organizations, and we are also closely affiliated to 350.org. So we have our international connections as well.
For you personally, what drove you to work in this field?
Yeah, so I joined the organization 4 years ago, and for me it was the climate crisis, and I have been worried for a very long time, but I was always looking away, and then I started to realize I can't do this any longer. I need to take action myself, and I wanted to work in a campaign that would have like big impact. And they had this position available at Fossiel to get the biggest pension fund, ABP, to divest from fossil fuels. And I thought, hey, this would be have a big impact if we are able to realize this. So that's when I joined the organization.
And what is your actual background?
I have a background in conflict studies and human rights. This is my master's education, so...
Makes sense.
It was kind of. Yeah, I think this is... Yeah, it makes sense because it's both also about movements and social change, and it's also different. But there are definitely similarities.
So that's in terms of your education. But what did you do before?
After my studies, I founded an NGO called Critical Mass, or a small foundation, and we made all kind of experiences, like theatrical experiences and experimental learning. And games on societal topics like prejudice and racism and societal issues, all kind of that. So this was really focused very much on awareness.
Very cool.
And I think this is also one of the reasons that I wanted to move away. After being the director for this of this organization for 15 years, I wanted to move from awareness to real action.
Yeah. And is Critical Mass still going?
Yeah, it's still going. It's still going very strong. So it's working in the field of education and in businesses and giving many trainings and very active.
Super interesting already. You mentioned that you wanted to move from raising awareness to actual action.
What is Fossil Free's tactics in this regard?
Yeah, so we set up strategic campaigns, often people-powered campaigns, in which we want to take away the pillars of the fossil fuel industry that are supporting the fossil fuel industry. So, for example, we believe the fossil fuel industry is supported by the financial flows and the access to financial means like loans and investors. So this is one thing that we want to take away. And this is why we are campaigning on fossil fuel divestment. But I think if you take it one layer higher, I would say we try to put the social license of the fossil fuel industry under pressure. Like we all know, fossil fuel companies or all companies need a social license to exist, to flourish in society. They needed to get people to start working for them. They needed to have access to politicians. They needed to sell their products. They need this social license. And I think in our campaigns, we always try to put their social license under pressure, because we believe it should be under pressure, because they are, not even they have been responsible for a large part of the climate crisis, but they also still lobbying and trying to extend the fossil fuel era.
Very true. So that I counted 2 pillars.
Yeah, so these are 2 pillars. Another one is, for example, their power in the media and in advertising. So we fight for a fossil fuel ad ban together with our local group Fossil Free Advertising.
Yeah.
So this is, for example, another pillar. Another pillar is, for example, the sponsorships that they give to cultural institutions to kind of have this positive image in society.
Yeah.
So this is also something that we have fought.
Yeah.
But it's also the legislation or the influence, the ability to lobby in politics. So there are many of those pillars that we try to dismantle.
It sounds also a lot like the battle with the tobacco industry, decades ago. Do you draw inspiration? Do you draw lessons?
Definitely, many. And I think that also, inspiration definitely, because what happened with the tobacco world, I mean, if you look at how we are living right now, and if you look at how people were living only 30 years ago, then we would always be in surroundings of tobacco air. I mean, we would have it in our school even. I remember that in my school, in my high school, when we went to the room where all the teachers were, there was smoke inside, everywhere. It was in the airplanes, it was in the trains, it was in the offices, in the bars. And I think this has shown that norms can change very quickly, because now we would not find this acceptable. We see that pension funds have divested from them. We've seen that it has become more difficult for them to lobby. But we have also seen what happens. We still gave the tobacco industry quite some access to politics and to come up with their own solutions. So, for example, our youth is now addicted to vapes instead of normal cigarette. And this is because we believed in the solutions that the tobacco industry delivered themselves. So I am not only taking inspiration of all the actions that have diminished the power of the tobacco industry, but also I'm learning lessons from what failed in a battle against the tobacco industry, and what we should learn and do different.
And is there at Fossil Free a structured way to, train people, newcomers to the organization? Is there a way to let them see these examples, maybe read something? Do you do that, or is it more personal, individual motivation and drive?
I think, to be fair, we always are dreaming of a good training program, but in reality we never have the time to set it up.
Yeah.
So I think much is being done by talking and by doing, actually, and by giving the example and getting people in that way involved.
learning by doing.
Learning by doing.
Also
I think this is like
valid.
Yeah. We do many things, but most of it is like mobilizing people to speak up. And I think that in many instances, many people, of course, focus on what they can do on an individual level, but people often do not realize that they have loads of influence as part of the organizations they are part from. So, for example, in our ADP campaign, we mobilized thousands of, 10,000s of pension holders to speak up against their pension fund and to ask for fossil fuel divestment. And we helped them set up local groups and let people connect to each other so that they could have their own campaign in campaigning for fossil fuel divestment. And they all set up their own petitions and they wrote their own op-eds. They had their own actions, and this created like a vibrant atmosphere of all kind of actions like popping up. So building a movement and getting people to speak up is, I think, like the most essential part. And then, of course, you have also like the research or talking about certain issues on social media, organizing protests and demonstrations, working together with other organizations, trying to form coalitions so that many people move in the same direction. I think this is all like part of our work.
Any future campaigns, events that we should look forward?
Yeah, one thing that we are going to do is to launch a lawsuit against the at the European Court of Justice because of the green taxonomy. In this taxonomy, new airplanes and cruise ships are going to be included in this green taxonomy, so they get this green label. Which is really weird for things that are like as polluting as those are. So we are going to fight it in the European courts. But we will do it together with other European organizations. So we work together, for example, with Opportunity Green, which is a British organization, and with other European-based, EU-based organizations.
On the one hand, you have the interests of the employees, of the workers, and also you have the need for sustainability transitions. How does Fossiel Vrij deal with this sort of issue of just transitions?
Yeah, and this is just one part of just transitions, of course. But I think that this is very important because I think we do have to make clear that we are not fighting against the people who work in those organizations, and those people who work in fossil fuel companies, for example, they also need to transition away to good jobs. And this is also for other organizations like, for example, Tata Steel. I mean, we need to find a way how to get those people to other jobs. I think what is interesting is we have been working a lot with the labor union, who really, I think, joined the climate movement. I mean, there's still many struggles, but they are seeing the importance of climate policy, and they, of course, are also saying, "Hey, well, we need policy, but do take care of the people who work in this industry." And I think these two messages together should be heard.
Right. And is it a particular labor union or the association?
It's the FNV, for example, like the biggest labor union, and I think, like in particular, like on the national level, you see that they clearly see this. I think in the local unions there might be difference if they all agree with whether this is a very important thing. But it is a conversation that is going on, and you do see them taking a stand on this. So, for example, the labor union supported the Stop Fossil Subsidies coalition, and I think this is really important that they also showed, hey, we don't need fossil subsidies, and this does have impacts for many of the companies that the people who are members from them, that their members are working for. But still, they say we need to get rid of these policies, and then we need to have the good policies to get those people to good jobs. And while we have so many jobs available in the green economy, that I do think it is really possible to get those people to different jobs.
Yeah, especially in the Netherlands and in the Western Europe, you have more options. At least in academia, a big focus is on the systemic character of transitions, so that it's not just one thing, but it's several sectors that are interconnected, and it's a process in time. And in this case, I want to ask you why you focus on fossil fuels as one product or one product of one industry.
Is it really one industry? Because I think that fossil fuels, I mean, it is being used by many industries. It's really connected in the whole society. It is part of the transport sector. Aviation is dependent on fossil fuel industry, even agriculture with, how do you call it?
Fertilizer?
Yeah, fertilizer.
Yeah.
It is made with fossil fuels. Fossil fuels is connected to all industries. So it does make sense to have this focus. I think that like 70% of climate change is caused by fossil fuels. So this focus on fossil fuels makes sense to me. And of course it has many layers and many different solutions in that. But I do think that focusing on fossil fuels makes lots of sense. What I find very interesting from the pension funds battle that we have fought against ADP and PSRW, like pushing them to divest from fossil fuels. In the end, they divested. Yeah. And then they said, we are not going to engage any longer with fossil fuel companies because we don't believe we are going to change them, but we are going to use our engagement time and all our efforts to get those companies that are still dependent on fossil fuels, but that have the power to change and the willingness to change, we are going to put pressure on those. So you see that their focus is like going away from the fossil fuel companies, which they cannot impact, or actually they can impact by just leaving them, because then there is like a bigger chance that we will get actual regulation. They harm the social license of those companies, and at the same time focusing their efforts on companies that are dependent on fossil fuel companies. Yep.
Before you mentioned collaborations, and you said you collaborate with universities and also other NGOs. What kind of collaborations are those?
I think we have loads of collaborations. Of course, I mean, like all those organizations that are part of the climate movement or that are working on climate, like the NGOs or the grassroots organizations that we work closely together with, but also many like very local groups that don't even have a name or a website, but like groups of individuals. This has been like, I think, even our biggest focus to work with those people. We work with big organizations if possible. Like, for example, what I find really interesting is that like after ADP and PME divested from fossil fuels, they became even part of our coalition to stop fossil subsidies. So you kind of like from like opposing each other, we became allies in our next battle. So I think we are always looking to make like the biggest, broadest coalition of organizations to get this change. So in the end, there were like 25 local groups fighting to get ADP divested from fossil fuels. So for example, there were like teachers working together, or there were university people, or the people working for municipalities, or working for the municipalities of Amsterdam, of Almere, or Leiden. They, all these groups had their own small campaigns. And now we are fighting against ING, and we want ING to stop financing fossil fuel companies. And now we do basically the same. We have found that like, many people are connected to ING because, for example, their favorite museum is being sponsored by ING. Or the organization they work for has an account with ING. And we try to get those people together. And those, once they are together, they set up their own campaign to ask their cultural institution or the company or their sports club to speak up against ING. And those, so I think the power of an individual for just speaking for yourself is very small. But if you have like all those organizations speaking up, then it becomes very powerful. And for example, to come back to the labor union again, like the labor union has a bank account with ING, and they told ING after we put an ad in a newspaper asking ING to stop financing fossil fuel industry, together with like 30 big clients, including the union. And after that, the union went to the radio and they said to ING, if you don't change your policy, we are going to look for another bank. So you have like still like 3 more years to change, but then it needs to be done, and otherwise we're going to look for another bank. And I think this shows the power of like starting with people, going to the bigger institutions. Those institutions have power and they speak up. Yeah, it's kind of like, I think you're always building up on previous work in this.
And I'm particularly curious about universities. How do you cooperate with Dutch universities or other universities, and in what way?
The universities played an important role in the ABP campaign, but this was again not directly done by us, but we worked together with, for example, Scientists for Future. They set up a letter together with the young academies of all universities, asking the directors of the universities to speak up in favor of divestment of fossil fuels. And then they found it very difficult to speak up, but they set up a working group, and that working group gave an advice to ABP, which was, I think, an important advice for ABP. So this also contributed to the pressure on ABP.
Yeah.
So, but we didn't ask universities ourselves. It's more like people from our movement or from the big movement, they involved them. Actually, like the ABP fossil free campaign started with Drift. Like they were the ones. The people working there were like really like the front runners of that campaign, like 10 years ago. So and we have always worked very well together with them, and they are always part of like many of the coalitions we do.
When I was in Maastricht studying, or actually working as a PhD student, there was a lot of students who were really speaking up and organizing in this sense.
I think actually Maastricht was the best example.
Oh yeah.
Because in Maastricht we had our local group Fossil Free Maastricht. They have been very active, and they actually got the rector of Maastricht speaking up for divestment. And this has been very important for other local groups to know how to do it and to follow their example.
Nice.
So Maastricht has been like one of the first successes.
So shout out to Maastricht.
Yes, definitely. One of the things is that we really try to make clear to people that climate change is not something, or the climate crisis is not something of the future, but it's something that's happening right now, and people are already impacted. And people are not only impacted by the climate crisis and the consequences, but also by those fossil fuel projects that are going on. So we try to collaborate with people who are on the front lines and try to get their stories in the Dutch media or to our community. So this is very important. And it's also related to like really understanding that it is urgent action that we need. Climate activists are everywhere, and they speak up, and you can just connect to them, and they are part of the same networks. I think the climate community is quite well connected to each other. And it's quite possible to find them, and we are also having the same battles. Like for example, we are fighting against LNG expansion in the Netherlands, but this LNG is coming from the US, and in the US all those communities are fighting against the export terminals. So our fight against the expansion of import terminals and their fight against the expansion of export terminal is connected. And we should tell their stories because their people are getting sick there and are getting cancer and asthma. And we need to tell people in the Netherlands that this is like our gas is coming from there. And before, like, of course, we got our gas, for example, from Groningen, and it led to many earthquakes and many consequences, and we stopped, which made sense. But what we didn't do was to introduce a plan to get rid of gas, like quickly. And now we are still dependent on gas, and we are importing it from the US, and now we are making people sick over there, or we are importing it from all over the world, and everywhere it has its impact. So making the connection between those struggles is very important because people in the Netherlands don't even realize that the gas that we have now has such a huge impact on human lives.
What are fossil-free's hurdles? What are you looking for at the moment in terms of overcoming?
The government.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. I think that is really those are really difficult times because for a long time we felt like progress was made. It was too slow, but at least we had progress in one direction. And right now, you also see the chance that things are going to move backwards. For example, this can be seen with ESG and green investing from pension funds.
ESG?
Yeah, so this is like that pension funds need to invest in a responsible manner and pay attention to environmental issues and social and governmental issues.
The sustainability reporting.
Yes. Yeah, for example. And also like making sure that the companies you invest in are responsible. And for long there was kind of like this trend to get like more of this in the pension funds, so they were moving in this direction. And now you see, for example, in the US, this very strong anti-ESG trend, and it has really made like one of these cultural issues that is being fought over, like part of the woke war. And now you see exactly the same battle of like the anti-ESG movement. You see it coming over here.
Okay.
So, for example, in Parliament last week, a motion was accepted in which a politician asked or called pension funds to only go for profits and not to pay any attention to any other goals that they might have.
Right, yeah, that's a kind of a setback.
This is a huge setback. The good thing is that the pension fund said, we are not going to move back. So this is important. Like even if you care for profits, you should still pay attention to the climate, because like the climate crisis is like harming or is a risk for our entire portfolio. Yeah. So clearly we have to protect it. So I think it's good to hear that now the pension funds are telling like our story to the world. So that is again very good, but still like this backtracking is, I think, a very serious threat.
Yes, like from the last century, the same debate now, as you said, coming back.
Yeah, we even get like ministers that deny that climate change exists.
Yes. So in this sense, it's very cool that you are managing to turn your quote-unquote enemies into allies, and then they are already fighting the battle.
I think that is like one of the best things and the best wins that we have. Yeah, and this has been really important. I think we didn't realize it in the beginning that this would be the result, but like once you realize that it's the result that you are like expanding your allies, I think that is really great.
And as you said, it's all about the individuals in those organizations who share your values, who share the understanding of sustainability struggle, and who organize together with their colleagues.
Yeah, I think what we have noticed is that it is possible to create like very big changes if you organize together. And this is often something that is lacking. People don't organize like enough together with one single target. But if you do, then you're really able to achieve very big changes.
What else would you say for fossil free as a hurdle?
I think the very well organized lobby of, for example, the fossil fuel industry,
Right.
but also for example, the aviation industry. We have been doing a lawsuit against KLM, against KLM's greenwashing, which we won a few months ago. But if you see how well their lobby is organized, how much money they have for their campaigns to continue this greenwashing, and how underfunded we are, this imbalance is perplexing.
Yeah.
And I think it is really difficult to really fight that, because you have an enemy, or just to call them that, like, but the group that you're opposing has like 100 or 1,000 times more money than you have. We don't have the money to pay for ads anywhere. We don't have money to pay for lobbyists. We all have to do it, with a bunch of mainly volunteers, and that imbalance is really difficult to see at times. Because you can win things, and then you see the entire group standing there, like taking the next steps. They are always ahead of us, and we are fighting the current battle, and they are already like preparing the next one.
Okay. Thanks to the army of
the army of lobbyists.
Oh my God. I was kind of prepared to you were going to say that, but still hoped. Well, actually, you told me a lot of positive things as well, your successes and how you organize your work.
We can make the changes. The problem that we have is a lack of time. So if we would have like 100 years, we would succeed, like completely. I have no doubts about that.
In terms of climate change.
In terms of climate change, but we don't have those years, and the emissions need to go down now, and they don't. So while the battle, I think, we are making a transformation and a transition, and it's coming, and of course it has like the hiccups and people opposing it, but this is like also part of it. But the problem that we have is that we don't have time for that. And I think if you talk about hurdles or things that are like over our head or make it very difficult, is this reality.